I hope you can all see my screen.
Yeah, I see your screen.
Okay. So we are going to continue from where we left off last week. Let me create. Let's add a widget. Let's call it home page or something. Just that. And we know the commands we can use to bring up the template for widgets. This time around, let's say I want to create a stateless widget, so STL. Then I have that. I can enter the name, home page. Sorry, let me do this. Yes. Now we import all these guys. Material. The first widget I want us to look at today is this widget, the container. But before that, let me assign the home property of our material app to the widget I just created. That's home page. Okay. So the container widget, the container is basically let's say you have any widget, let's say a text widget, and you want to style this text widget. So you first of all, let me change this to say a text widget, and it has a text of.
Increase your fonts.
Hello.
Yeah. Can you increase your fonts a little bit?
Oh, sorry.
Control plus.
Is it better now? Or some more? This looks huge.
It's okay.
Okay. Let me wrap this in a scaffold. All right. One more thing. Don't bother about this other widget I'm using. I believe we'll get to take a look at it later. But for now, let me just increase the size of this guy. We've looked at all of this in the previous session, so I'm not going to go through them.
I think you can take the opportunity to explain the safe area to them.
Okay. So safe area, like its name suggests, it's safe area. You see, on Android, there is this status bar, and there's the bottom here where there's the navigation button, is the back, the home, and the recents. There's those things. And on iPhone too, there's the notch and there's the bar down here where you can do the swipe and things. Okay, those things, they are part of the system UI, and they will always intrude into your application. So you saw that before I added the safe area, my hello text was way underneath the status bar. Let me just reverse that and let's see how it looked like. I hate this. Okay, so the text looks really small, but try and cope with me here. You see, the hello is like way up there behind the status bar, but that's not what the applications usually look like. Usually your stuff begin underneath the status bar. Okay, so if in order for the body or the content of your application to not interact or be buried underneath some systems UIs, we use the widget called the safe area. This safe area by default we introduce some paddings based on the system you are running on. If you are running on Android, it will use a padding size that will make sure that your text is not buried underneath any of the system UIs like the status bar. Okay, so it will by default apply some paddings and push your text beneath, so it will be under the status bar. If your text happens to be down here and there were some navigation buttons as well, you will realize that the safe area will push that text up as well, so it wouldn't be on top or under the navigation bars. Okay, so that's what safe area does. It just basically introduces padding around your UI so that it's not intruding on any system UI. If there are any questions on that, you could please ask away.
Yes, the safe area. From your example, you've done body safe area. Is there a safe area for app bar and bottom navigation something? The bottom navigation bar, or it's just for the body?
Those things are handled by the scaffold. It takes care of all those. It's the body that's important. Okay, the body basically just occupies your entire screen. Unless maybe you define an app bar. If you define an app bar, the body will start under the app bar. But if you see here, we don't have an app bar, so the body defaults to starting from the top. Do you get it?
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So if I had an app bar, then we probably wouldn't have this problem. I hope it's clear. Give a font size of maybe. Okay. Okay, so you see now with the safe area, by default my text now starts under the it doesn't start somewhere in the exact place where the system's UI is, but rather it starts underneath it. So there's nothing messy about it. Do you get it? So that's what safe area does. So now I think we can move over to the main widget we're starting with. That's our container. So like I was saying, let's say we have this text here. You see this text is just raw. It's just hello. There's no style. There's no beauty to it. The container allows you to add decorations to any widget at all. And also it allows you to add some sizes. I think we should just get into it and you get to know what I'm talking about. So yeah, it basically allows you to style your widgets in a way. So let's say I wrap this text widget in a container and I run this, you'll see no difference. You see, as I run this, it's done running, but there's no difference in the UI. So where does container shine? First of all, let me give this container. The container can take a color. Like we told you yesterday, if you want to see the properties of a widget, just on Windows, just press Control Space, and it will give you all the things you can give to a widget. And with any widgets that's highlighted, there's an extra pop-up here that tells you everything about that property. Okay, so right now alignment is highlighted, and we know the type of property this is. This alignment variable here, property here, is of type alignment geometry. So if I click behavior, it's also of type click. So you know the type, and it gives you a description about it, so you know what a general idea of what that property is about. This is going to be important to you for you guys. You may not know there's no way you can know everything about every widget. So this helps you to give you an idea of what a property of a widget is, in case you need to use it someday. But for now, let's use the color widget. I'm sorry, the color property. And let's give it, say, a color of red. Now you see my text has a background, a rectangular background with color red. Okay, so now, well, that's not much. Anyway, there's more we can give to this container. Okay, then there's one other thing. You don't always have to just do Control Space to give you the properties. You can just hover your mouse over the widget in question, and you see all its properties here as well, and then you can pick whichever one you want. Okay, so let's see. The container has an alignment property, it has padding, it has color, it has decoration. Most of the things you'll be using will be the width, the height, maybe the margin, the child. Yeah, you'll use the child as well, probably, and then the color, and then the decoration. These are the things you'll probably use most of the time. So let's take a look at some of these. We've seen the color and what it can do. Let's take a look at the width and the height. So like any width and height, we know what those are. Width, let's see what type it is. It's of type double, which means numbers. Okay, so let's say I want this one to be 100 units wide, and let's give it a height of, let's see, the same 100. Okay, the height is also of type double, as you see. I run this, and then all of a sudden my container is big. Do you get it? My container is now large, but you can see the text is still, the text is something like this. You probably want your text to be centered within the container. So now how would you go about that? Let's see if there's any property of the container that can help us get that done. There's an alignment property. I believe the alignment can help us do that job. Let's see if that can help us. So alignment. Disclaimer, most of these things I have never used before. So we are all figuring it out as we go. And that's the life of a programmer. You figure things out as you go. So let's see. We know the alignment is of type alignment geometry. And there's a specific implementation of the alignment geometry. That's just alignment. So we can use the alignment, and then we can give it any of these properties to see where it will position our text. Just for test's sake, let's take the bottom center value, and let's see where it puts out. So you see, bottom center puts it at the bottom and in the center. Do you get it? So if that's not what you want, just find whichever one you want. Let's say I want it to be in dead center. Center from the top, center from the left. Exactly. So this kind of looks appealing. Okay, so that's how you can center an item within a container. You don't always have to go and take another widget as a child. Some of the widgets have these properties within them. You can just go on and use, rather than go and use maybe the center widget to center the item. Okay. By that I mean you could have just gotten rid of this alignment property and wrapped your text in another widget, the center widget, and you would get the same thing. I believe you get the same thing, but that's too many lines to introduce. So why not just use the containers property itself, that's the alignment, to get that same job done. Okay, so if the widget you are trying to use doesn't have that thing you want, then find a widget that does that job and use it. So if the container didn't have an alignment, then I can go on ahead and use the center to wrap my text, then I can achieve what I want. I hope it's clear. So that covers alignment, it covers width, height, color. Let's see one more. Let's tackle the decoration. Okay, when you hover over decoration, it's of type decoration. Okay, this decoration, you cannot use it directly. There are different implementations of it that you can go on ahead and use. How do I know? Because I've encountered this before. I tried doing decoration, and yeah, I had issues. So I had to find an implementation of it to use. Oops, sorry. I can't do this. You see, it gives me an error. It's telling me that there is an abstract constructor. I believe when we're doing classes, object-oriented programming in the introduction stage, we tackled inheritance and all these things, and the modifiers. We may have encountered abstract modifiers and interfaces. So what that means is that you cannot use that one directly. You have to use some other class that has implemented this guy. Okay, so if I take a look into this decoration class, we say its decoration is declared as an abstract class decoration. Anything that's abstract, like I said, you can't use it directly. You rather have to find some other class that has implemented it, and then you can go on ahead and use that class instead. So let's see if we can find any classes that have implemented this guy. I can't find anyone here, but I know of one offhand. If you can't find any, a Google search will lead you the right way. I know that there's a box decoration that we can use, and that one is a concrete implementation of the decoration class. So I can go on ahead and use that class instead. And see, that one isn't giving me the error I was encountering earlier. I was encountering earlier. Do you see? Now this box decoration class here also has its own properties. It has a color, it has a decoration image, it has a border, it has border radius and so many other things. Shadow gradient and a shape. Okay, so these properties all look cool. Let's see if we can work with some of them. Now you realize that this box decoration has a color property in it. So the thing is, whenever you use a decoration, it nullifies whatever you have in color. So you don't get to use color anymore. If you have decoration, you can't have color. Do you get it? Because the decoration already has a color property. So you just move your color and put it directly inside your decoration property. That's if you need it. If you need to use a decoration, then take out your color and put the color in your decoration. And we get the same results. You see, nothing changed. Okay. Now let's try and see if we can. You see, this thing here, this container we have looks raw. The corners are so pointy. They look like they're ready to stab someone. So let's try to make it more presentable by rounding the corners. Let's see how we can achieve that. First of all, let's hover over the decoration and see if there's anything that can help us achieve that. There's a border radius. Okay, so I think we can use the radius to round the corners a bit. Let's try and see if we can make that happen. Border radius. We know it's of type border radius geometry. Again, like the decoration bits, the border radius geometry, you cannot use it directly. You have to use an implementation of it. And there's a border radius class that implements the border radius geometry. So I can use that one and use any of these constructors it has to assign a radius to my container to round the corners. So let's take the all and say we want to make all the corners 10%, 10. We want to round them all by 10. But let's see. Okay, all doesn't take, you see, I have an error here. This all doesn't accept a double. It doesn't accept a number at all. It rather accepts a radius property. Okay, so we have to pass to it a radius instead. And I think there's a radius. There's a radius. Yeah. So let's see if any of these. Yeah, so this works. But we don't want a radius 0. We want something else. So let's say radius circular. And what does that also accept? That one accepts a double. So you see, I can pass my number here instead. And then I have it work. And then it can work now. So let's see what this yields. So you see our corners have rounded. I hope my screen hasn't cut off and you can all see. Okay, silence means you can. So you see the result. Okay, so you see the result of applying a border radius to my container. We now have something that's more like it's neat. It looks nice now. Maybe the red is too something. Let's try and change the red to something else. Where's my color? Let's say a blue or something. Blue looks nice. Okay, blue looks quite okay. So yeah, so now we have applied a border to our container, which in essence is a decoration of our text project. Okay, let's see some other things this box decoration has. It has gradients. Some of these we won't look at them. It will be your job to go and look into them. But let's see if we can give it some borders. Wow, our time is almost up. We didn't start early today. Sorry, I'm giving the border to my border radius instead. The border is supposed to be part of the decoration. So border, let's see what type this border is. There's also a type of box border. So let's see if we can use a box border property. Okay, that's also giving us the same abstract constructor issue, which means it's an abstract class. We cannot use it directly. We have to find some other implementation of it and use. And I believe there's a border property that we can use instead. Okay, and it also has an all constructor that which accepts a color for the border color. It accepts a width, which is a double, and it accepts a border style. So let's give the border a color of say colors dot what color? Let's just try green, and let's give it a width of say 4. Now let's see what that yields. You see the borders around our widgets. A green border that's 4 units thick. Okay, yeah, so this looks cool, though the colors do not look that nice, but like, yeah, you see, you can do so many things with things like this. Let's see the border style. Okay, it's called style. The style is of type border style. So let's see border style. Sorry. There are only two border styles we can apply. There's solid and there's none. And the default is solid. And that's what we are seeing here. If I give it none, honestly, I don't know what the one will have, what that would do. So let's see. Okay, so if you give it none, it means in a sense you are saying we don't want a border at all. So the border just disappears. Okay, so if you want a border, then just leave this one for the default, which is solid. And we have our solid border. Let's see what other properties of the container we can tackle. Wait, let me show you one more thing with the decoration. You see, we use the radius here, the border radius, to round the corners, but you can also use the shape. Okay, you can either use the border radius to give it the rounded corners, or you can give it a shape to do that job. Okay, the default shape is rectangle. That's why when we didn't have the rounded corners, it was a rectangle. Okay, because the default is rectangle, but we can change it to something else, anything we want. We can change it to something circular, and yeah, we can have that happen. Let's see if we can give that a shot. See how it goes. Shape. The shape is of type box shape. Let's see if we can use the box shape directly. There's box shape dot circle. Let's see what that does. Cool. And now our container is round. You see. And I believe you can create your own shapes and use them. Maybe. Yeah, I'm sure. But for now, let's just keep this here. Let's just keep this one. Just keep the radius. Cool. So let's leave it. Let's leave the containers as we have done it now. But I leave it to you to go and play around with all the properties, with the remainder of the properties, and even the ones we've tackled today. And yeah, know what they do. If someday you need them, at least you can find a way around them. Now, there's one more thing. See, our container here is directly attached to the status bar of the phone, and it's also attached directly to the left side of the phone. So if I want to introduce some spacing around it and then the phone's borders, how do I do that? There's a widget we can use for that called the padding widget. Okay, we can use the padding widget to achieve this very same job. So to do that, I can wrap my container in a padding. Now that's the next widget we are looking at. So this padding widget, it takes a property. Let's first of all hover over padding and see what it takes. It takes don't worry about the key. Almost every widget has a key property, but don't worry about them for now. So we are considering it two. That's the padding and then the child. In this case, the child is our container, and then the other property, which is the padding, has a value of 8. Let's see what that looks like. So you see, so padding is an English word. We know what that is. Basically, padding just adds a space between two items. Okay, in this case, it has a space between the padding widget itself and our container. Okay, between the padding widget itself and our container. So let's increase this a bit to let's say 16. Okay, there's no much difference, but anyway, you get it. So anytime you want to introduce a space, maybe you have designed something and you realize that there's not much space between a widget and its child or something, just wrap one of them in a padding and give it a padding value, and then you can introduce some space. But now, did we have to wrap our container in a padding widget? No, because when you hover over container, you realize that container already has a padding property. I believe so. Yeah, it has a padding property over here. Okay, like I said, if the widget you are using already has what you want, just go on ahead and use that one rather than wrapping it in some other widget. So let's get rid of this padding widget from our container. Let's rather use the containers padding property and give it an edge insert value. We want to give padding to all four corners of our container. So I'm giving it let's say 20. Okay, so we've learned something today. I've learned something. First of all, we have discovered that there's a difference between the padding property of the container and then the padding widget in a way. Okay, the padding property for the container introduces a space between within the container itself. Okay, you realize this container has two things. Sorry, it has one thing: the container itself, and then the text it contains. So if you use the padding property of the container, it introduces space between the borders of the container and then whatever child it's housing. Okay, in this case our container is housing a text widget. So the padding property we introduce a space between the container's borders and then the padding, and then the text widget we have in there. Okay, which means if we really want to introduce space around the container itself, then we have to use the padding widget to achieve that. Okay, so you play around with things, you get to learn, and then you know what works and what doesn't. And that's the life of a programmer. So we can get rid of this one. Great. Now that's padding. And like padding, there's another counterpart of padding called margin. It does basically the same thing, but for margin, rather than introduce space within the container, it will introduce space, rather than introduce space between itself and its child, it introduces space around itself. I don't know how, if that's clear. Let's take this. Let's say let's take this container widget. Okay. Basically, in this scenario, I believe the margin and the padding will probably do the same job. But let's see what that yields. Let me take this padding out again. Let's play around with margin. So let's wrap this container within a. Okay, I don't have a margin here. There's no margin widget. Or I don't have one.
I think the container itself has a margin. Check.
The container has a margin, but I thought there was a margin widget as well.
I think the container that introduces the margin rather.
Okay, cool. I thought like the padding, there was a margin widget. Okay, that happens.
Yeah.
Okay. So the container has another property called margin, and again, like padding, it's also of type edge inserts geometry, and like the creation we saw, it's also abstract, so we can't use it directly. That's why we have been using a concrete implementation of it. That's the edge inserts. Okay, so let's give it a margin of say 50. Let's see what that yields. Okay, so like the padding in this scenario, it does the same job. It introduces space outside of its bounds. So know the difference. The container's padding widget, its padding property introduce a space between the container's border and anything that's inside the container. Okay, and the margin introduces a space between the container itself and anything that's around the container. So know the difference between padding and margin. Padding introduces space within, margin introduces space outside. So we get to know that when we wrap our container in a padding, it did the same job that this margin property of our container is doing. So rather than wrapping container in a margin, you can just go on ahead. So rather than wrapping container in a padding widget, you can go on ahead and use its margin property to achieve the same thing. I hope that's clear. There's some other, and the padding widget doesn't have any properties. We saw all of its properties. It has just the padding value, and then the child it's going to house. Okay, and those we have already seen them. So I think we can move on to the next. Let's see what's next in line. We've looked at padding, margin, container. So we have bottom up bar, and our time is almost up. Let's see. So when we looked at scaffold, we saw that it has various properties. It has the app bar. It has the body. It has a drawer, a start drawer, an end drawer. It has a snack bar. It has floating action button. We saw all of those in the previous classes. It also has the bottom app bar, which we played around with last week. So let's see if we can go into more details with that one. Bottom. Is it the bottom app bar, the bottom navigation bar?
Yeah, the bottom navigation bar.
Bottom navigation bar.
Yes.
Okay.
We take the bottom app bar.
Bottom navigation bar. As you can see, it's a widget. And like we said, we saw in the previous classes, Flutter is basically made up of widgets. Everything, almost everything is a widget. So if you say a widget, it means you can put anything you want there. So last week, I believe we put a row here. We put a row here last week, and we did our own thing for the children, and we put some icons over here. And yeah, and that was because we were learning rules. But there's a special, I believe, there's a special widget for the app bar we can use, for the bottom app bar we can use. Yeah, so there's a bottom app bar widget, and there's a bottom navigation bar as well.
Yeah, but we use the bottom app bar.
You choose the bottom app bar.
Yeah.
Okay. So it has a child property. Let's see what this child property is about. It can only have one child, so we can make this child a row.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
So let's say this is a row, and our row takes children. It's an array, or in this case, a list. Okay, so let's say it's going to be a list of last week's quiz icons. Let's try that, and it will be a refresher on our icons knowledge. Let's say we have an icons dot menu. Let me duplicate that. And let's say favorites. What else? What icon could we use?
Notification, make a camera
Okay.
notification too.
Okay, let me add another one for notifications. Let's work around with these ones. Let's see how this gets to look like. Well, it's not showing, so there's something we can, I believe, let's give our bar a color and see if our things will show. Pardon?
I think the icons color. So give it a background color to the app bar.
Let's try the same blue color to match with our container and see what happens here. Oh, still. Okay. Changing the color for our icons themselves. Let's see black. Let's see if this one will show. Wow.
Check this.
Come again.
There's something not covering the bottom of the screen.
Okay, yeah, sorry, there's an error somewhere.
I
have an error somewhere, so my code isn't even building. Yeah, this padding. We don't need this. Yeah. So let's see. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay. So we clearly don't want this. And we learned last week that row has and even today that it has a main axis alignment property we can use to spacing them. So let's say we want to put a space between all of them, or let's see space around. Okay. Now it doesn't look pretty. Let's try and give it a height. Does our row have a height property? Pardon?
So I think you can give it a padding. The padding would be the best thing.
Let's wrap our rule in a padding widget. It doesn't seem like enough. Let's try 16. 16 looks quite okay. So there's a basic way you can do your bottom-up bar. Like it has other properties you can play around with. It has a notched shape, some things, some clipping and things you can play around with. I can get rid of this color because I think the default is already black. And that I think we can, how do I say it? There's another bottom-up bar we can use that can help us by default with the clicks and everything. But for today, let's take this one. We'll probably look at the other bar later. There's a specific the other one. There's another button. The bottom navigation bar. That one has those properties built inside of it. For this particular app bar, you will have to handle the clicks and everything yourself. But if you use the bottom navigation bar, that one already has those navigation things built into it. So you can click and you can have your page change and everything. Or should we look at that one?
Yeah, I think we have some time. We can still look at that before we close.
Okay. Let me comment about this. I've used it only once, so I may make mistakes.
Sure.
Bottom navigation bar. It takes a list of items, which when you hover over it, these items is a list or an array of bottom navigation bar items. So a bottom navigation bar item, and a bottom navigation bar item requires that we give it an icon. So let's say icon, then we give it an icons of the same icons we use probably. Menu. Now let's duplicate this favorite camera visions. Let's see what this one gets to look like. I have another error somewhere. Here. It's expecting a closing bracket. Oops. We have our first error.
Every item must have a label. So it is you can. So you need to give
the bottom navigation. I need to give it a label property. And the label is an ordinary string. So let's say menu. Let me just copy this. Wait, wrong place. Okay. Now let's change the color of our bottom navigation bar. There's a background color. Let's give that the same blue color we had earlier. And again, our things are not showing.
Does it require
change
a
the
height?
icons color and see.
Does it require?
Does it require?
I'm asking if it has a height, like wrap it in a size box with a height.
I think it already comes with the default height for a bottom-up bar.
Okay.
Let me try something. Okay, so it's the colors of the icons.
Okay. Yes.
Let's say black. So guys, you see how this is going. You don't always have everything figured out. The IDE is going to support you. Just look at what it's telling you and then figure things out as you go. I think I have to add the color here too. But things are distorted. Just leave this as menu. And so you see this bottom navigation bar has it has an on tap function. I don't know if we are ready to go into functions yet.
They're not there, so
yeah, okay. So we put a hold on that.
yeah, but then I think we can do something small, probably print something on this.
Okay. So like I said, this bottom-up bar already comes with the clicking, the handling of the functions for these items for us already. So as you can see, as I type them on my phone, they are reacting to my taps. You can see the shade around them, and when you long press, it gives you how do I call it? What's it called?
The label.
Yeah, the label. And by default, I think it shows the text. But I think because the text is also white, or maybe that's why. So when you select an item by default, I think that's when. Let me see. I think we can change something here with the.
Text or something.
Pardon. With the labels, I believe we can hide them.
Selected labels or something.
Come again.
Selected labels.
I can't hear you properly.
Yeah, it's a property that shows selected labels.
Yeah. Whether the labels are shown for the selected item. So yeah, let's set that to. It's also, let's see what type it is. It's a bool. It's a bool. We know what a bool is, true or false. We don't want to show the label, so let's set that to false. And yeah, as expected, that fixes our alignment issue. There appears to be too much space between these two though, but that can also be fixed. Yeah, so the bottom-up bar has another property, like we're saying, the on tap, and that basically, it's a function that whenever you click any of these things, that function will get called. So within that function, you can change the page to whatever page. You can change this entire page to whatever you want to show. Okay, so if I tap favorites, let's say favorite will take me to maybe some, let's say Twitter. It will take you to things you have liked. So clicking this will just load your liked page and all the things you've liked onto the screen. Okay, so within that function, within this, we can do that. And don't worry about how I'm going to do this, but I think we will look into it. It's a function. Okay, and we know what a function looks like. It's a function that accepts an integer. So, and that integer is the index of the particular has been picked. So if I tap the second item, it has we know array starts from index 0. So this item is index 0. This one is index 1, index 2, index 3. Okay, there are 4 items and 3 indexes. So whenever I tap, we receive that index. And for now, I'm just going to print that index. So let's say selected index is index. Now let me open my debug window. and hopefully you can see the index get printed when I tap. Why is nothing working?
Check the output. Let me see the output window.
Yeah, output instead. No, I don't think it's output. Let me reload and see.
Oh, yeah, rebuild and stuff.
Same issue. Okay, I think I know why. I believe our widget has to be stateful for this to work.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Our widget has to be stateful.
That's fine.
Should we do that or?
I think now we will get to that part later.
Okay. Okay. I think that was the last widget we had to look at, the bottom up bar. Okay. So we have learned that you can either use the bottom up bar or you can use the bottom navigation bar. The bottom up bar basically leaves everything to you. You have to handle everything yourself, including the navigation and everything. The buttons, the icons that will show, and their labels, and like everything, basically everything. You have to handle everything yourself. But if you use the bottom navigation bar, most of the things are handled for you, and you just have to fill in the blanks and then go. Okay, so I think we will leave the rest to you guys to go and play around with. Just use whatever you encounter and see the results for yourself. And by so doing, you probably get to learn even more than we know. So yeah. And you have seen firsthand what it is like to be a programmer. We were struggling a lot with some of these things because yeah, it's basically still quite new to me. Yeah, so that's what it is. You get to learn as you go on, and you venture into it not knowing what it's going to yield, and in the end things will work out for you. So if you have any questions, anything, any clarifications or anything, you can ask away. And boss Amakwa, if you have anything to add to I think you can add.
Yeah, hello. So I think right now we are done with everything. If you have any question or anything, you can just bring it up before we close. And I know there will be an assignment given again. So let's try and complete that. So if you have any question, you can bring it up. Okay, so I think there's no question. Then I think we can close here. There will be an assignment. We'll send an assignment on the page. Please try as much as possible to do it before Friday, and let's know the feedback to see that you guys are getting it. Otherwise, it means we will have to go over whatever that we've taught for you to get it before we can move on. Because we can't continue because you guys are still not getting it. So please try as much as possible to normally go through the videos again to just get whatever that we taught you and do the assignment as well. All right, James, thank you very much for your time. And also you to thank you very much for joining as well. So let's catch up on Friday. All right, thank you and have a nice evening.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.